Spiritually awake people often begin to feel out of sync with the fast, noisy rhythm of the world. And this shift can be confusing at first. Activities that once felt exciting or normal may suddenly feel overwhelming, pointless, or energetically heavy. This change is not rooted in arrogance, antisocial behavior, or fear of people. It comes from a heightened level of awareness. As consciousness expands, sensitivity deepens, sounds feel louder, crowds feel heavier, and constant stimulation begins to exhaust the nervous system rather than energize it. In modern life, there is an unspoken pressure to always be busy, social, and externally engaged. Going out is often associated with happiness, success, and belonging. But for spiritually awake individuals, this pressure starts to feel artificial. They become aware of how much of social life is driven by distraction, performance, and unconscious habits. Loud environments, surface-level conversations, and forced interactions can feel like an assault on their inner calm. Staying home becomes a natural response, not an escape. Home offers something the outside world often does not: energetic neutrality. It is a space where there is no need to impress, compete, or explain oneself. The body relaxes, the mind slows down. In this quiet, awareness sharpens. Thoughts are observed rather than chased. Emotions are felt rather than suppressed. This inner stillness is not boredom, it is clarity. For someone who is spiritually awake, clarity is deeply nourishing. Another important factor is nervous system regulation. Spiritual awakening often brings buried emotions, old wounds, and deep realizations to the surface. This process is intense and requires gentleness. Constant external stimulation can interfere with integration. Staying home provides a controlled environment where the individual can process inner shifts without overload. Silence becomes healing. Solitude becomes supportive rather than lonely. There is also a growing awareness of authenticity. Spiritually awake, people begin to notice how often social settings require masks. People play roles, follow scripts, and avoid uncomfortable truths. For someone who is awakening, this feels increasingly uncomfortable. Pretending drains energy. At home, there is no role to play. One can sit in silence, reflect, journal, meditate, or simply exist without being observed. This authenticity is deeply grounding. Importantly, staying home does not mean rejecting the world. It means recalibrating one's relationship with it. The spiritually awake person is learning to move from inner alignment rather than external expectation. They begin to understand that peace is not found in constant movement, but in presence. What once looked like isolation now feels like sanctuary. Over time, this preference for staying home becomes less about avoidance and more about self-respect. It is a recognition that inner peace is valuable and worth protecting. The home becomes a container for awareness, healing, and self-connection. In choosing stillness over noise, spiritually awake people are not shrinking their lives, they are deepening them. As spiritual awareness deepens, another major reason spiritually awake, people stay home begins to surface. Their relationship with energy fundamentally changes. They become more aware that every environment, conversation, and interaction carries an energetic tone. What once felt neutral now feels draining, chaotic, or misaligned. This awareness is not imagined. It is the result of heightened perception. When consciousness expands, sensitivity to emotional undercurrents, intentions, and unspoken tensions increases. Many social environments are built around unconscious coping mechanisms. People gather to escape themselves, to numb discomfort, or to distract from inner emptiness. This can show up through excessive noise, alcohol, gossip, or constant stimulation. For someone who is spiritually awake, being surrounded by these patterns can feel heavy, even without participating. Simply being present in such spaces can lead to exhaustion, irritability, or a sense of inner disturbance. staying home becomes a way to preserve energetic balance. Another layer is emotional boundaries. Spiritually awake individuals often become more empathic. They can sense moods, emotional states, and unresolved pain in others without being told. While this empathy is a gift, it also requires protection. Without strong boundaries, they may absorb emotions that are not theirs, leading to confusion or fatigue. Home becomes a place where emotional boundaries naturally strengthen. It is easier to remain centered when external emotional noise is reduced. There is also a growing intolerance for superficial engagement. Small talk, forced laughter, and repetitive conversations begin to feel hollow. Spiritually awake people crave depth, presence, and meaning. When social interactions lack authenticity, they no longer feel worth the energy investment. This does not mean the awakened person feels superior. It means their internal compass has shifted. Time and energy are no longer spent automatically, they are spent intentionally. Staying home also allows space for integration. Awakening is not a single event, but an ongoing process. Insights, realizations, and inner shifts continue unfolding long after the initial awakening. These changes need time to settle. When life is too busy, awareness remains fragmented. At home, the mind has space to connect patterns, release old identities, and realign values. This integration is essential for emotional stability and clarity. Another overlooked reason is discernment. Spiritually awake people, they begin to notice how often social obligations are driven by guilt or expectation rather than genuine desire. They start asking themselves a new question. Does this align with me? If the answer is no, they allow themselves to stay home without self-judgment. This is a radical shift from people-pleasing towards self-honoring. Staying home also strengthens intuition. In quieter environments, subtle inner guidance becomes clearer. Decisions feel less reactive and more grounded. The person begins to trust their inner signals rather than external opinions. This trust is fragile at first and can be easily drowned out by constant social noise. Solitude protects it. Ultimately, spiritually awake people stay home because they are learning to live from the inside out. They understand that peace is not something to be found in crowded spaces or busy schedules. It is cultivated in stillness, clarity, and conscious choice. Home becomes the training ground where this new way of being is strengthened. As spiritual awareness matures, spiritually awake people begin to understand something most people overlook. Energy is finite, and where it is placed determines inner stability. Section 3 of this journey is about energetic discernment and conscious boundaries. Staying home is no longer a reaction to the world, but a deliberate choice rooted in self-respect and clarity. The awakened individual recognizes that not every invitation deserves a yes, and not every environment supports their well-being. With heightened awareness comes a deeper sensitivity to emotional atmospheres. Certain places feel overstimulating, while others carry unresolved tension, competition, or unconscious emotional projections. Spiritually awake people often notice how quickly their inner state shifts when exposed to such environments. They may feel anxious without cause, mentally foggy, or emotionally depleted. These sensations are signals, not weaknesses. They indicate misalignment between the individual's inner state and the external environment. Staying home becomes an act of honoring these signals. Rather than overriding discomfort to appear normal, social, or agreeable, the awakened person listens. This listening marks a major internal shift. For much of life, many people are taught to ignore their internal cues in favor of social expectations. Awakening reverses this pattern. Inner truth takes precedence over appearance. Another important aspect of this stage is emotional sovereignty. Spiritually awake individuals begin to separate their emotions from the emotions of others. They recognize that they are not responsible for fixing, absorbing, or managing everyone else's inner world. Yet this understanding takes time to embody. Early on, being around emotionally charged people can still feel overwhelming. Staying home provides a neutral space where emotional boundaries can naturally strengthen without constant testing. Solitude also plays a critical role in emotional processing. During awakening, suppressed emotions often surface. Old grief, unexpressed anger, and unresolved fear rise into awareness, not to punish, but to be released. Crowded or distracting environments make this process harder. At home, emotions can be felt without interruption or judgment. This allows genuine healing rather than suppression disguised as productivity or social engagement. Staying home also supports mental clarity. The awakened mind begins to notice how much of social interaction is driven by unconscious patterns. Repetition, comparison, status, and performance dominate many conversations. Over time, this becomes mentally exhausting. Silence, on the other hand, sharpens perception. In stillness, thoughts slow down. Awareness deepens. Insights arise naturally rather than being forced. There is also a shift in how solitude is experienced. Before awakening, being alone may have triggered boredom, restlessness, or insecurity. After awakening, solitude becomes restaurant. It no longer feels like absence. It feels like presence. The spiritually awake person is no longer seeking constant stimulation to avoid themselves. They are learning to be with themselves without discomfort. Importantly, staying home does not mean rejecting the world. It means choosing engagement consciously. From this grounded state, the spiritually awake individual can enter social spaces without losing themselves. Their presence becomes calmer, more authentic, and more selective. They show up when it matters, not out of obligation. This stage is about refinement. Energy is treated as sacred, time is respected. The home becomes a place of recalibration where inner alignment is restored. From that alignment, interaction becomes meaningful rather than draining. Staying home is not withdrawal, it is preparation.